Uh, legal. Okay, I think there are probably several people here who do legal translations. I definitely have done quite a few. And one, of course, you have to be an expert or at least sort out terminology very, very quickly because they have a lot of legalese. Um, one interesting anecdote, I'm not sure how it fits, but I was doing a legal translation from Russian into English, actually, and I translated, I think the word was законодательство. I translated as legislation. And the girl, who actually is completely fluent in English, not at my level, but she's very good. Sometimes she would translate these documents herself. She said, the word you used is incorrect, or it's obsolete, or it's outmoded. It just should be laws. And I was like, no, legislation is the higher register word, and it's completely ubiquitous. And I did my research because when somebody challenges me, I was like, well, maybe I'm behind the times. Maybe she's right. I asked a few people, and they're like, no, of course, legislation. Translators and lawyers. So I don't know why I said this, but again, stand your ground if you're right, and don't stand your ground if you're not right. So yeah, but legal, let's see. Of course, it is sometimes very redundant. American legalese is very redundant. So sometimes it's okay to translate two terms as one. Cease and desist. You know, maybe in Spanish or in Russian, it would just be okay to say прекратить ваши действия or something of the sort. You don't necessarily need to have two synonyms for two synonyms, not in legalese necessarily, and not ever if it gets the concept across, but you can if you want to show the style of American legal translation or legal documents. And of course, the highest level of, oh yeah, boilerplate, whatever, whatever. Okay, I can't even, boilerplate. Oh, okay, boilerplate. Interesting. Why boilerplate? Okay, fine. I'm not even sure I know the exact definition of boilerplate. Somebody puts, if you would, the definition of the regular term boilerplate. See, I'm not ashamed to say there's something I'm not sure of. So, yeah, with legal, the epitome of it would be, okay, thank you, Julian. The epitome would be being able to write in such a way that people would think this is not a translated document, but actually a contract or an agreement written by an attorney. I've had this happen to me. What else? Well, of course, meaning is everything. Style is maybe secondary. It's not secondary to the degree that it can be convoluted, but it's not the same focus that it would be in literary translation, right? And here, of course, the rule stands. You don't add, subtract, or alter anything, obviously without permission from the author. So, okay, good. Let me skip down to point 3, technical and medical. I would say it's pretty much the same, except it's not necessarily always as redundant. I don't do a lot of technical and medical because it's boring to me. I can. And I think Victor, when we had Victor this summer, he said, you know, well, when you're not an expert, just tie the grammatical structures together and do the best you can with terminology, and that's what you can do. But there are people who specialize in medical or technical, and they make actually very good money because it's boilerplate translations and they use translation software. And this is actually what I would probably recommend. I would say it's not a bad idea to use translation software. We are more of a translation boutique, as maybe you'll see later today, and so we don't really use it. And I will probably not use it for the rest of my life. Yeah, exactly. So this guy actually, the music example was written by 2 Indian scholars. And usually people from India are natives of English, but in this case, I saw right away that there were actually mistakes in English grammar. And so I took the text with a grain of salt. Like I knew that there could be mistakes and they don't exactly mean what they mean. And I actually also took the time to ask Rick to find their contacts, and I wrote them on LinkedIn and on Facebook. They didn't reply, but anyway, I did my due diligence because a friend asked me, and so yeah. But what I didn't do is she actually sent me 5 texts, but they were all very similar. They were the same, these 5 graphs. And I said, well, I figured it out. I solved your translation riddle, but I don't want to do the drudgery work. From now on, you can just take it and you can do it yourself. So I don't know if you like that. role, but I like the role of the riddle solver. It's like once I read, regardless of your political opinions on Donald Trump, I read a book about his style of negotiations, and it was by his director, one of his right-hand people, and they said, well, he just negotiates the big picture. He negotiates the concept. He doesn't negotiate the minute details. He leaves it to his executives. And I kind of liked that idea. I solved the riddle and I said, you do the rest. And she was like, okay. So anyway, technical and medical, it all comes down to terminology and then just stringing it together. And I would say clarifying, make it as clear as you possibly can. And like Julian said, the text sometimes has mistakes or is convoluted. So yeah, let's see. Literary, literal, literate, and illiterate. So we know we don't want to make it literal. Rick, I know I didn't ask you to put the slide, but if you have the slide of the scale of literalness in translation, it might be good to show. But basically, on that scale, on the very, very left or right-hand corner, it's completely literal, like completely nonsensical, keeping very much to the words and grammatical structure. And on the other end of the scale, it's unduly liberal. Yeah, exactly. What it says here, it says free, but on a similar scale, I've seen unduly liberal or unduly free. That's what is actually meant. This is what this girl was doing in her interpretation. Idiomatic, of course, means that it's an exact translation, but it's natural. And that's where we want to hit. But I would say that idiomatic is also a range. And, you know, depending on whether we're doing legal, technical, or literary or poetic, you can vary, like in poetic, you can vary a little bit more towards the free range or even slightly into the free range. And in the technical styles of translation, you stay closer to the left of the idiomatic. I hope that makes sense. Okay, it's not idiotic, idiomatic. Let's go back to our presentation. Okay, so for literary, like I just said, we can be a little bit more free because the style, the concept, the concept, the beauty of it takes precedence even over the meaning. The meaning is still super important, right? So, and like Sarah, for example, translates poetry. I translate poetry, and in poetry, you have a very interesting task. In fact, it would be a good exercise maybe for anyone because you have to keep the structure, you have to keep the rhyme, the rhythm, you have to keep the meaning, at least somewhat, or as much as you can. I always try to keep it as much as I can. And obviously the style and the register and the beauty and the aesthetics of it. And literary, which is not poetic, I say is very close to poetic, except you don't have to keep the structure, but to some degree, you have to keep the structure. Remember, we gave examples from, well, for those of you who were with us this summer, we gave examples from the book Supercargo with this really long-winded sentence. And the guy actually said to me, there is a rhythm to prose. And I didn't understand back then what it meant. And I said, there's no rhythm to prose. And of course, I was right in the definition of rhythm as in structured poetic rhythm, as in like pentameter or choraic verse or iambic verse. That doesn't exist in prose. Sometimes it can, but there is a certain rhythm. So, but anyway, in literary, I made my point. I think you still keep to the beauty of it. And of course, illiterate is there just for the joke of it. Don't do illiterate translations. Sometimes it very often happens. Okay, creative nonfiction, another nonfiction. Well, it's nonfiction, but it sort of approaches fiction in a way. So you can use, I would say, some of the fictional rules and take some liberties, but usually whenever I take liberties, I coordinate them with the author. We've talked about this before. I just wanted to comment on it briefly. Business and motivational. I think here the register and the style and the motivation and the spirit is probably as important as what you say. So you could sort of theoretically pose the question, what is better, a badly translated motivational or business book for which keeps the spirit, or a faithful translation which doesn't keep the spirit? And the answer is, of course, neither. And you want to get both across. But I would say this, like when I translated Grant Cardone's books, which is this exactly business and motivational, it was as important to keep his bold, arrogant, assertive style as it was to get everything right. But of course, both are important. In technical translations, of course, the meaning is more important because you're not doing it for the spirit.